Okay, I don't know if people have been following the news, but I will start off with a moment of silence. It looks like we have 11 Marines, 1 Navy corpsman, 15 are killed in action in Afghanistan, 15 additional folks injured. That's kind of the preliminary report. Just like a moment of silence. Thank you. Tough environment that we operate in, never goes away. You know, this is being on the game the entire time. You never know when things are going to happen, and they continue to happen. I think we've talked a lot of things, important things over the last 2 days. They kind of set the stage for a report like we just received, and I think it tees up a great conversation that we're going to have here with Vice Admiral Kitchener. Admiral Kitchener is the SWO boss. So he has been that for a little over 1 year. You know, had what, 3 destroyers, 3 cruisers for background, ESG-2, time in Europe, time up in Newport. About as well-rounded of a surface warrior as you could find, with tons of waterfront experience. I couldn't be prouder to introduce Roy today to do the keynote speech, and I think it's been terrific. Kind of the theme throughout, as you know, you set the stage, was Stay Navy. And the Coast Guard guys kind of led with a very similar discussion. They kind of fed together, and we interacted on both days between Navy and Coast Guard. It's been great. I'm going to turn this over to you, and then we're going to do questions.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. First of all, really good to see a lot of old friends, a lot of old bosses, a lot of old mentors, and a lot of sailors on the waterfront. I got a lot of good feedback from this morning. And today I kind of wanted to talk to you about a couple of things, sort of, you know, where we've been, a little bit of a scorecard, I guess, where we need to go. Some things, you know, kind of woven throughout my talk this morning will be about what our challenges are that remain. And we do have challenges. I would argue with you, though, that there is no more lethal surface force on the face of this planet than ours. And that's primarily because of all our sailors and what we've got out of them. And we'll talk a lot about them today. I'll tell you a few sea stories. But with that said, I'm going to try to stick to I've got a speech because I need something to stay within the buoys. If I go off the top of my head, I'll be here all day, and we'll have a good conversation, but perhaps won't get all the points across. So first, I'd just like to thank the SNA team for Bill Erickson, who's timeless, and as always. And I know I challenged him this year because I said, Bill, we want to try to do something different. And I'm sure he just probably went through the overhead back in his office. But I think it came out really well. We didn't exactly do it the way we wanted because I really wanted to showcase some of our new ships. But I thought we did a pretty good job. And we'll look, as we always do, to improve that next year. And then for you, Admiral Hunt, too, for leading this team. And really looking forward to kind of kicking this off today and then working all the way to national. And hopefully we'll be able to do that. I think we will. But I've also found, as all of you have, that going through this social media medium, whether it's Zoom or another tool, has really enabled us. And it's allowed me to reach out to many more people. And I guarantee you there's a lot of people that just decided, hey, it might be easier to stay where we are and watch this on video than come here in person. So I appreciate that. But about a year ago, I took over this job. And I came from Surfland, so I was pretty familiar with some of the issues. I had the Chief of Staff job here about 10 years ago, so the man, train, and equip thing was not new to me. And I thought, okay, what do we need to get after? And it's you know, forward thinking, improved readiness, and increased lethality were probably my top things. And so when I looked at what do I want to talk about here this morning, I wanted to talk about, hey, how did we do? You know, I set this agenda, kind of laid it out at National last year, and where did we end up? And so with that rightful focus on man, or train, maintain, fight, and win, We went after a bunch of things pretty hot and heavy. As a matter of fact, at one point, I think in around December, January, I asked a couple members of my staff, hey, are we doing too much? Are we pushing too hard? And the answer was no, let's keep going. We focused on maintenance planning. One of our things was, how do we make more ships ready for tasking? As you all know, particularly most of the ones in the back there who command ships or are part of triads or serve on ships, we have a lot of requirements out there. Probably don't have enough ships, and the requirements keep growing. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So one of the areas we thought we could, find time was in our maintenance availabilities, on-time completion, right? And you'll hear a new term today, the days of maintenance lost, right? How do we reduce those days of maintenance lost? And so we came up with some analytics, and we did some the Perform to Plan initiative, which kind of targeted a whole bunch of things that we could do, and we really focused on the planning side of it, because what we knew we were doing was putting too much work into work packages and not allowing enough time. And we think we made some progress on that. I would tell you, not enough progress. So then we started looking at the execution side. We had driven that planning agenda pretty hard, but we were still only getting to about a 60% on-time completion rate. So we looked at execution, because we thought that's where the issue is. And then we looked at, let's look at the front end of availability. What are the issues? So we pressurized, the ability for our industry partners to come up with an integrated schedule. And we found that there were some shortcomings there. In the way and how long it took us to do change requests, we found that, yeah, we were identifying all the work, and then we were getting mired in a bureaucracy of trying to get paperwork to execute the rest of the availability. We made some progress now, but we still lost a lot of time to maintenance delays. Some numbers I'll give you just to kind of put it in perspective. In 2019, we lost about 7,000 days to maintenance delays. In 19, it was about 2,000, and this year, and this is both coasts, we're on track for about 1,200. Still a lot of time. I mean, you can put that into DDG life and all kinds of other statistics I could show you. But what I would tell you is, from E1 to 08, the common comment I get from the deck plate is, hey, Admiral, you want us to do a lot of things? Give us more time. And so how do I could give all that time back to COs, and I should be giving it back to them so that they can make sure their crews are ready for the fight that we keep challenging them with. Over in the training realm, I think there's a huge success story here, and we continue to build on that success. We came up with the Afloat Training Team Accelerated Certification, where we embed the ATG folks on board our ships, and we go to sea with a group and we certify them. I would tell you, if you combine that with some of the analytics stuff we've been working on, where we can actually now, we're doing a pretty good job of, all right, what ships, based on their readiness, their crew proficiency, how many people they have on board, which ones can we accelerate if we needed them to get to the fight sooner, if there was another requirement? I think coupling that with this training initiative, there's a lot to be done there and a lot to be said, and we're going to continue to work that. And maybe over the next year, as we work with Pac Fleet on our war fighting plan in the Pacific, test that out in a couple of exercises. We continue to expand our focus on virtual training. We just opened up we just ran our first course over at our new Officer of the Deck course at the training facility we opened here on base. If you haven't been over there, go over there. The place is cavernous. The amount of trainers we have in there and the scale of them, from individual trainers to full mission bridges where you can bring your CIC in, is exactly what we planned for and what I wanted when I was a junior officer. I think at this point we've got about, by the time a JO gets to their ship or their second tour, they've got about 550 hours of simulator time. Combined with that time underway in that first tour, we are building more proficient mariners. We have the data to show it, and more than that, I've got the COs and the XOs and the teams on those ships with all that experience telling me, yes sir, the product is pretty good. On the tactical side, we want to do more. I talked to you a little later about live virtual construct as we train underway. But we've also added a number of simulators to the Waterfront, and we continue to expand on that. You'll see big changes in IMAD and ASW trainers throughout the world, not just in Norfolk and San Diego, in Sasebo, in Yoko, in Rhoda, everywhere. In Everett, it's really good and really excited about it, and it's going to continue to grow. We continue that integration of the live, virtual, and constructive capability. I would tell you surface warfare is leading that. And what that does for us is it allows us to emulate threat emitters, but more importantly, give us that capacity, show that threat that we would really face and the numbers we would face, because we cannot generate that kind of OPFOR anymore to test our strike groups. That's where we're doing it. We're doing it underway, we're doing it in port, and we'll be able to net it throughout the world soon enough. We experimented a little bit with that in our large-scale exercise, and we will continue to get the most we can out of that. Another initiative furthering our live, virtual, and constructive training that I'm pretty excited about, because in my opinion, if you're going to do training well, you need to do it aboard your ship, right? And so we need to make sure we're building our ships with the right training systems. But we've got this CIAT, and if you haven't been over to the integrated trainer we have with the CICs, you need to go look at that. We're moving that technology to ships. So you'll be able to do that training on board using your own system anywhere in the world without losing the current operating picture. Major breakthrough in my opinion. So you can see, we've already shifted and we're starting to accelerate moving ahead, and so that these preloaded scenarios that I grew up with, you know, ACTS on an Aegis system, that some of you all we have moved away from that, and we are increasing speed. We're to dynamic scenarios beyond certification and maintaining that razor's edge to give us that competitive edge. So advancing technology has really enhanced our quality of our training, but we all know where we really make the difference, and that's in our people. And we need more talented people to not only develop tactics, but also introduce those tactics. When we came up with the WITI program, and we introduced to them to the Waterfront, we changed the conversation in the surface force back to warfighting. And now we need to take it even further. And we're validating, as we validate the number of WITIs we need, I will tell you, I already know we need more. And Admiral Alexander, who's now over at SMITIC, he's working on how. He's also working on how do we build SMITIC into the warfighting pillar it should be in our community. Where do we want it to be in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years? We want to bring all our WITI training to San Diego. We consolidate it in one place. That way you get cross-pollination between the IMAD, the MIW, the ANFIB, and the ASW team. Not only that, San Diego's a pretty good sell to bring junior officers who want to be WITIs, right? I'm not spreading them all over the place like to Dahlgren and everywhere else. And so we deliver a really good product at SWAT, our integrated training that we do before Comp 2X. And it was so good that we do them all over the world now, but I need the WITIs to do more than just that. The WITIs also need to be the ones developing the tactics for all these new systems, and I'll talk about them a little bit, and all these new ships coming into the fleet. We've got to get ahead of that, and it's coming really fast. Let's talk a little bit about, continue the discussion on manning. So I would tell you, overall, fleet manning has grown since 2015. It is much better than when I had command of USS Princeton on the waterfront. That being said, we still are challenged to move the available manpower we have around the fleet. And we lack capacity in some critical warfighting NECs. So I kind of like to talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing that, but also some of the stress it puts on the force. I'd say the first example I'd give you is our air intercept control supervisors, which I would argue has probably been a challenge since I've been in the Navy, and myself and CNP have vowed that we're going to fix that before we retire. But we only have about 61% of what we need to fill, and that gives us gaps at sea. Yet, it's a requirement we want to have on our destroyers. Other critical billet shortfalls, and you're all familiar with them, those who serve right now, the top snipe, the combat systems maintenance manager, Tomahawk management planner, nav ETs, and that results in a continuous flow of manning actions, not only directed by me, but directed by a bunch of the Commodores and the ISICs out there in the audience to make sure that when our ships go forward, they are manned, trained, equipped, and certified to do the missions that we ask them to do. But that is putting a stress on the force, and we've got to move away from that cycle of depletion. Our approach to these manning problems, and Force Master Chief might have talked about it this morning, and if he didn't, then you need to get him on the side so he can explain to you firsthand in more detail what we're doing. But we're trying to move beyond those short-term solutions to those long-term problems. We're looking at the feasibility of options, and we've already got some good headway on it, and that's increasing special duty pay, advancing people into jobs. So if you're a second-class petty officer and there's a first-class billet on a ship that's critical to us, we'll promote you into that job. And we won't take that promotion away. Once you do it, you're a first-class petty officer. We're doing more things at CNP with my duty assignments and our demand management, our detailer marketplace. All these things to try to get at getting people back to sea. Sea duty must remain kind of our North Star. We want to incentivize sailors to go there. So if we increase sea duty time, say from 5 years to 7 years, we ought to compensate for it. If we're TEMATting a sailor for the 3rd time, we ought to pay him to do that. And those are the things we're trying to figure out. The other thing long-term that I'm pretty excited about, and we started it last year, is the surface manning experience. So right now, I don't get, and Admiral McLean does not get a vote on where we send some of our sailors. And we all know those sailors are critical to maintaining the A sub O of our combat systems, of our engineering plants. So we picked a number of rates, and the aviation community does something like that, but we picked a number of rates where we knew if we could manage these people, not only could we track their proficiency and experience, but more importantly, we could put it where we needed it. And so we'll start experimenting with that. We should be we've been doing it a year. I think probably later this fall, we'll probably have our first good look at how far we've come and where we can start putting people, but more to follow. But that's more of a long-term initiative. But measuring their value and then putting them where we need is something that I'm pretty excited about, and that right now, I do not get a vote on. So the array of ongoing maintenance, training, and manning initiatives underway do contribute to our readiness and have contributed to our readiness, and we'll talk about that shortly. But they have to be aligned. They have to be aligned and supported across our entire surface warfare enterprise. So in the past year, let's just go through some of the numbers here. We deployed 53 ships, opposed foreign adversaries challenging the homeland on both coasts. The Zumwalt class participated in an integrated fleet exercise, and we're working on how do we employ them in the Western Pacific next spring, summer. Not just one, but both of them. And then we've got the other one in the build yard. We've used a USV to provide targeting information that enabled an over-the-horizon missile engagement, and we've got our USV scheduled throughout the year to not only continue to work on the autonomous things we need them to do, but also to test different capabilities with experimentation on C5ISR or counter C5ISR capabilities, some ASW capabilities. Lots of good work going on there. LCS, I could have a whole nother session on LCS, but we went after LCS, teaming with our NAVC colleagues, and we've outfitted the next version of Strike Missile. We've got 3 independent variants deployed out in the Western Pacific right now. It's a big article in CNN today. I don't know if you saw it or not on the front page. Admiral McLean's got 2 of them supporting 4th Fleet operations, and we had 2 before that. At one point, we had 6 deployed worldwide. We've got 3 more ready to go next year. We continue to push it. We're starting to understand the reliability better, working with industry to come up with better parts that last longer, and also looking critically at how do we sustain them forward and what other things do we want to do. But most importantly, I would tell you, we've figured out how to use them. We started out with that ship as a littoral combat ship. You could say it evolved into something that, people thought, hey, can we use this in a carrier strike group? So we went back and asked the users, the numbered fleet commanders, and asked them what they wanted it to do, and then set our goal on training them to those missions and going after those missions. Not out of the woods yet. I would argue that there's a lot more work to do. We've got to get sailors transitioned more to maintaining those ships, but I think we're headed in the right direction. And matter of fact, we brought Rob Nowakowski, one of our reserve officers, is on board running that for us, and I'm pretty excited about it. But again, I'm not going to declare a victory. There's a long road ahead. Boy, are we seeing some progress there. So it was a pretty good year if you look at the numbers, and we did all that. We did all that in the shadow of a pandemic, right? Where everyone else was wondering, how do we fight our way out of this? Well, we were. So did anybody in here really think our sailors are not that tough if they can do all that stuff? I mean, they do it every time. And let me tell you, we asked them to do a lot. We were ramming them before they went on deployment. We weren't giving them any port visits, and when they came back, there wasn't a lot to do either. Yet, they stayed at it and they delivered. And we got a big thank you for that for them. But can we do more? So that was pretty good, but can we do more? Because I would argue we probably have to do more for the fight that's ahead. So can we create more ships ready for tasking while fully preparing every crew for the mission at hand? Because that's what I keep talking about. I think we can. I think we can do it by moving forward with more urgency, more precision, and more importantly, unity under a common plan that strengthens our competitive edge, which deters adversaries, and when necessary, enables us to fight and win. So what is that competitive edge? You heard me say that a couple times probably in this speech. You've probably read about it or heard about it as I go around talking lately. What does it mean for our surface force? And what does it mean to the surface warfare enterprise, which I would argue everybody in this room and on these piers belongs to? Competitive edge is leading the world in warfighting technology. Competitive edge is knowing where the surface force is headed, and all of us, including industry, our NAVC partners, and others in the enterprise, converging on the same course. Competitive edge is denying our adversaries battle space and freedom of maneuver every day in peacetime, which I would argue, if you haven't seen what's going on in the Western Pacific, and I'll give you a story a little bit later, that's what we do every day. Competitive edge is not only knowing we can defeat the enemy, but the enemy knowing we can defeat them. It's about combat readiness, but more importantly, it's about combat action and winning that action. So to compete and win requires a steady strain in every facet of our community. Warfighting, material readiness, professional development, innovation and interoperability, and supporting infrastructure. What do we need? Not only the peers, but where do we test on land our systems, our software, so we can deliver it on time, so that we're not tying our ships up in long availabilities, ships that we need on point. Those are the things we have to look at. And the groundwork we've had recently, these initiatives we started last year and that we're working at, that is our starting point for strengthening our contribution. So as we move into the next year and beyond, we will maintain a steady course while increasing our speed of advance. The ever-changing and developing threats around the globe demand not only that we deploy and sustain the deterrent force we have now, but that we build and introduce our future force with that urgency and precision. As CNO said last year at SNA, he said the next 10 years are absolutely critical to our success. We are revolutionizing our fleet by introducing 10 new or modernized platforms in this decade. DDG-X, FFG-62, Light Amphibious Warship, LPD-17 Flight 2, DDG-1000, Flight 3 DDG, DDG-51 2.0 class modernization, LCS lethality and survivability, medium USVs, and large USVs. In total, we'll add more than 90 ships to our fleet this decade, while simultaneously introducing substantial capability upgrades to our sensors and networks. I would argue that that is modernization on a never-before-seen scale, when you add in those ships And those capabilities and the complexity of some of those capabilities. SPY-6 and a new combat systems integration, for example. Now, everyone in this room, and some on my staff and some out there, kind of have a front row seat to see how much work it takes to climb back when our fleet introduction outpaces supporting infrastructure. We cannot afford to allow that to happen. We cannot delay those capabilities going out to the fight in the Western Pacific. So we will partner with industry and NAVSEA on modernization to ensure our new capabilities are fully tested, outfitted, and supported upon entering the force. That is a seam we must close quickly, very quickly. We must restore rigor to fleet introduction, but it can only be done with a rigorous acquisition process, thorough conceptual testing, clear foresight, and daily diligence that results when our community has a common operating picture and shares the same enduring goals. Simultaneously, we'll harness the power of data analytics, we already have, to continue to improve our sustainment process and help us generate more ships ready for tasking. With careful focus and complete alignment, the power and creativity residing in our fleet and its foundry are more than capable of bringing these goals to fruition. So here's my asks. Industry partners, develop capabilities that not only match our competitors, but far exceed them. And approach those designs with a careful eye as to how we will update software and maintain the longevity of our systems and ships. We can no longer, and I can't say this enough, afford to leave our ships back here in long availabilities when they're needed forward. Commanding officers that are here and out on the social media world, be bold with a can-do spirit, but temper it with realism and a full understanding of risk. We need you to invest in your crew's success, motivate your teams to such expertise that they become known by would-be adversaries for their masterful presence on the sea. Have you seen examples of that on the waterfront? Every day. So let's tell a quick sea story. So USS Mustin just returned from Japan to San Diego, over there doing FD&F service, bringing her back here for some upgrades. Back about 30 days, getting ready to send out on another operation down south. So they're the ones, and I don't have the picture to show you behind me, but have you seen the picture of the CO and the XO out on the bridge wing with CV-16 off the port side as they stayed right alongside that ship? So they told me the story, and they gave me this patch when I was down there of what they did. That team found that Chinese carrier with about 10 escorts. You think those escorts were harassing them a little bit? Yeah. They sat down, figured out a plan how to get in alongside. And then they realized that the escorts, they all moved away from the carrier. So clearly they were told, hey, don't get too close to us. Not so much for the Mustin. They went in, sat alongside. I can only tell you the treasure trove of information they gathered and the pictures they took that they showed me. Impressive. And then I asked them when they gave me this patch, and you can see it says 89, South China Sea in the background, and then it has this non grata across the bottom. I said, hey, what's that non grata all about? They go, well, sir, that was from the Chinese demarche that said the USS Mustin is no longer welcome in the South China Sea. Not only did they do it once, but they're in production for another patch, and I don't know if it's going to say ×2 or whatever, but they issued another demarche, again, to say, hey, we can't emphasize enough, we don't want you around here. That's the type of leadership, those are the type of ships we have out there today, and we will continue to deploy. And I could tell you more and more stories like that. I was on USS Bunker Hill. I sat in the wardroom, I had a lieutenant, the fire control officer, gave me a brief on what they did in the South China Sea. It was a busy place. They're really smart. They did a great job, and it was the same type of stuff. Go talk to our sailors. We got to tell this story more. You can hear it from the SWO boss, but it's much more fun and entertaining when you're talking to a lieutenant or a first-class petty officer. I had a sonarman on one of those ships that challenged me. He said, "Hey, sir, when are you going to start making sure that the level of ASW training is the same across the globe? Because I'm telling you right now that a ship in 7th Fleet can do so much better than these guys over in 6th Fleet and 5th Fleet. So competition." Now, Admiral McLean would tell you, and I had the same job, those guys on the East Coast are pretty good when they're tracking SEVs and things like that as well. So we have now got sailors connected to mission, out there doing real things, and they're doing it well. For all you junior officers and enlisted leaders out there, here's your task. This force embodies that fighting spirit I just talked about and always gets the job done. Yet some will continue to criticize us. But the surface force I see today, that I hear from you, the voices I get from the fleet, is incredibly capable and determined. But do we have our faults? You bet. And we've got to address those, and we've got to continue to work on them. And I owe all of you a framework for professional development that focuses not only on competence, but character as well. And I ask that you keep an open mind, share your ideas, and commit to continual learning. We will count on you to lead this fleet one day. You need to be ready. We each have a part to play, so it is crucial that we align across the surface warfare enterprise, our entire force, and all the supporting elements. Our unified approach will require open, honest communication and frank discussion about the headwinds that we're going to encounter along the way. Just like forceful backup on the watch floor, it's the only way we will effectively leverage the power and creativity of this force and all of the stakeholders involved. I'm confident that under a common goal, we will create and sustain a force that wins in any scenario. I look forward to what the next year holds, the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years for the surface force. And I look forward to continuing the discussion of alignment and where we will go. So thank you all for coming out today and for logging in, for all yous out there on the video feed. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions, sir.
Okay, and the way we're going to take questions is use your QR code that's in the brochure here. So go ahead, click on that, enter your question. That way we can read it. We'll get it out to the audience in a very good and appropriate way for everybody to hear, not just those that are present. So the first question that I would have.
Yes, sir.
We spent a lot of time this morning talking about specifically why to stay Navy. And we had great comments across the group here and a lot of chatter afterwards, yeah, you know, including myself on going, boy, that resonates tremendously. What got you to stay Navy?
What got me to stay Navy? I will tell you, you know, I have this conversation a lot with a lot of different people. And there's a lot of things that made me stay Navy. But a couple of things, right? One was the authority and responsibility I got early on, the authority and responsibility that I have today. But being the officer of the deck, in charge of 300 people, underway, that the captain has entrusted me to take care of, that responsibility earlier on, that meant an awful lot to me. And it was very meaningful. It was very satisfying. Yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. But I really enjoyed becoming that expert on the ship and understanding what it was. I didn't really know what surface warfare meant, I don't think, until I went to my second job. And when I went to my second job, I used all, and it was a very unconventional job, but I went there and I used all those skills I learned on that ship to teach a bunch of sailors how to do a whole bunch of skills, whether it's navigation, gunnery, how to repair things, and turn them into an incredible fighting force. And I learned that all on my first ship. And then, you know, I told the funny story today about when I was a department head. Any department heads out there? Okay, good. They're all working. Probably hands down the hardest job I had in the Navy. And I remember, working on a cruiser, had a pretty demanding CO. And I remember one day thinking, and I was just starting a family, and I got something in the mail. I was in Norfolk, and it talked about, going to see a headhunter downtown or something. So I'm like, oh, maybe I should go check it out. Maybe there is something else to look at besides the Navy. And I went down there, and we didn't coordinate anything, but at the same time, Chang and Ops were down there at the same time. I went and talked to these different people, and absolutely nothing that they talked about lit a fire, put a glint in my eye, whatever the terms you want to use. And I said, hey, as hard as our work is, man, it is the most satisfying stuff I've ever done. Building that team, leading those sailors, and I go back. I still do go back and do it all the time. And so that's what kind of made me stay Navy. It's that teamwork, that camaraderie, that sense of purpose. And I always tell people, and we just have to be careful the way we do it, but this is the United States Navy. We can do anything with the right leadership. We have all the right people. We have the greatest tools and capability. Yeah, sometimes we don't have enough of it. Sometimes we could do better with what we have and get more. But man, it's a really capable force. And you've got a whole bunch of people ready to enable you. So that's why I stayed in the Navy.
One of the topics that came up was mentorship. Can you talk a little bit about what, if any, specific instructions you give to your leadership and your support team to make sure that we get that out, both officer and enlisted, and how you would go about taking it to the next level?
Yeah, I think mentorship's one that comes up, and it's a challenging topic because I'll talk to some people, as we talk about perhaps doing formal programs, and the Navy's tried, right, in the past, and really hasn't had much success with it. And so some people advise me, they go, hey, don't call it mentorship, call it something else, and do that. What I would tell all the flag wardroom and COs when I talk to them is you've got a couple of simple things, right? Take the time to write letters to people. They mean an awful lot, right? I remember when I was in Monterey and there was some commanding general came as our guest lecturer, and he sat down in the room and said, and just immediately barked at us and said, okay, you've got 2 minutes, write down who the most influential person in your life is. I was like, okay, thought about it for about 10 seconds, wrote it down, and then he collected them all up. About 10 days later, my father called me up. He said, hey, I got this letter from this general, and he was telling me that you said, I was one of the most influential people in your life and the reasons why. It made my dad feel pretty good, right? So you got to do that stuff. You've got to call people. Had a JO who now works for us, but he wrote an article to USNI. I didn't necessarily agree with everything he wrote in the article, but it was very well written. It was innovative. I called him up at night, got home, and just called him up. Hey, give me his number, and talked to him about it. And started a relationship, building that trust, right? That's what we have to do with our people. We are a transparent force. There's probably corners that aren't so transparent, but we've got to build that trust with our team. And those are 2 ways I would tell you to do it. The other thing I think we need to do, and I talk with Kevin Kennedy back there from PERS 41 a lot, is how do we manage the talent we have, right? We do a really good job, I would argue, because I spend a lot of time on it, at managing talent at the 05, 06 level. Force does a lot of work on managing chiefs and master chiefs, and a lot goes into that throughout those communities, probably more than people think. But our JOs are always asking, but sir, what about us? How do we do that? And so we are looking at how we can identify people earlier on, make sure they understand the programs that are available to them, to be a financial specialist, to be a BMD expert. And I think we need to continue to do that. I've looked at trying to create formal things, but I've really erred more towards going to a more of an informal where I ask people in the flag wardroom or COs on the waterfront to call people up. Hey, this is somebody we need to watch, or tell me who we need to watch, and engage with them. And I think we need to continue to do that. But each one of us, and when I visit ships, and I sit there in the wardroom or the chief's mess, or sometimes even in the first class mess, talent management is important, right? I walk around engineering spaces a lot, and they always give me a really good sailor, right? And I ask, where are you going? What are you going to do next? What do you want to do? Hey, sir, I wanted to stay here. And I go, you going to go work on engines somewhere? Well, no, I'm going to go, work at the honor guard. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. All you people out there own a part of that, because you're the same ones blaming me for not getting good technicians on your ships. You've got to make sure we're taking care of those people, and the ones, and not everybody, but the ones that really earned it, we've got to put them into the right jobs and make sure we're developing them. We are looking at other things right now. I talked a little bit about it. We're trying to figure out, okay, how do we make the best COs and chief petty officers, right? I can tell you and I can measure how good of a mariner you are, how good of a tactician. We've gotten pretty good at that stuff. Not so good maybe on the character stuff, trying to figure that one out. So there's a lot of work going into that, and CNO's asked us to take a look at that. The good news about that is it's kind of forced us to look at this mentorship and talent management piece a lot closer, and so we're getting some good ideas. More to come on that one, but that's kind of exciting stuff.
You talked about what's going on in the Western Pacific right now. You take a look at what China's doing. You laid out where we are headed in new ship design capabilities. Is the trajectory good enough? Do we need to think out of the box more innovatively? And how do we get that innovative thought up to leadership and back into programmatics?
Yeah, so that's a great question, sir. And we had this idea yesterday at SWOFOTS that I was talking on the sidelines with, so I'll just tease it out here because this is the group that's probably going to help me do it. Is one of the things we started thinking about was, hey, at SNA National, we should do some kind of tech competition with high school kids and things like that, and give out some big prize. Bring them all in, let them show off what they have, because I do think there's an awful lot to be done. One of the challenges we have, I would argue, on capability stuff, and we won't get too deep into it, but some of the stuff that we're doing and coming up with exists at a very high classification. And I'll go to a ship and I'll say, okay, tell me what you're doing, and they'll give me a really good brief on what they have and what they're doing, and then you'll ask the question, okay, who knows the next level of depth on capability on board this ship? Who's the most informed? And we're not quite there yet. We need more people who know about some of the tools we have and how we can access them. So that's something we're working on as well. But I do think as we move through design, we're on the right trajectory. I hesitate to say we need to move quicker, because I look at some of the integration stuff that we're doing now. It's really hard, but I will tell you where we're challenged, and I think we can do better, because I've seen it, and Admiral Small's working on Overmatch, and Admiral O'Connor is working on the Forge, right, where how do we develop software quicker. We need something as we build our ships and as we upgrade our ships where we can do it incrementally, so that if we do run into problems, we can close the gate, you have enough capability what you have, and you can push the ship out. Right now, we're challenged by the fact that sometimes we'll get through all of our availability, we'll go to load software, whether it's machinery control software or combat systems, and there's a problem with it. And that requires a lot more testing. That is not the way industry is developing software, or commercial industry, I should say. And so we're getting smarter at that, and we're moving faster, but we can't do it fast enough. And it's, quite frankly, slowing down our ability to get more capability out there. That was probably the biggest thing I would say, besides for the innovation.
So a couple questions coming in from the audience here.
Oh, they don't have to put their names by them.
Let me ask you this. Can you speak to your priorities and any initiatives underway for commonality in the force?
Yeah, that's a great question. So trying to reduce variance in the force, right? So a couple different initiatives. I would tell you the number one priority for me is the integrated bridge and navigation system, right? So right now we have And somebody out there will probably correct me, but I think it's 19 different variants in our DDG-51 class. 19 different variants. Aircraft carriers, LHD, have one, okay? And so when we have a problem with one of the systems on DDG XX, it might be unique to that ship. We have to send a CLAD, you know, a class advisory with how you would manage a casualty, how you would address different things, and sometimes you'll have 2 or 3 glitches, and all that's embedded in this document. And we send it to them and say, hey, captain, team, good luck. Now, we've now added training to that where we go around. That is not the way to do business, okay? And so I went out to Philly to the land-based test site there in the old Navy Yard, and we do have a system that we put on our carriers. We own the software, the government, and so that means if there's something wrong with it, we can fix it on site and we can get it back out. So I am looking to convert all our DDGs over the next, whatever it takes, brief coming, to that system, because we cannot afford that variance. You get into some of the comm systems we have on our DDGs, and then it becomes even more challenging, right? Because of training, which is expensive, training all the different people on the different systems. I think as we work through the SPY-6 and integrated combat system, some of that variance will go away, right? On a very critical system where right now, with the number of baselines we have, which has gotten better, but still taxes us not only in parts, in training, you know, because I can't just take FC from this one and put them over on this one over here. And so those, IBNS is probably number 1, integrated combat system number 2, and then there's, you know, machinery control system variance is the same. And it really kind of goes back, and that's why I dwell on it so much. How do you develop software? Stop giving me the, you know, one whole load. Give it to us a little bit at a time and make sure it works.
Very good. Rick Easton asked the questions. So this is, you know, common one. Ship crew numbers are going down. The complexity of the ships and the missions we give them is going up. Is the training sufficient to handle that? Are you comfortable in those areas? What do we need to do?
I think the training is where we need it. I think the problem that we have right now is, and it's a tough one, right? We wrestle with this as a Navy, that I can show you that manning in the Navy, or manpower in the Navy, the people, let's just say that, the number of sailors we have since 2015 has increased significantly. I'll give you an example. The example, because I get beat up on manning all the time, right? And so I was on a cruiser, and we came around to the discussion on manning, and you know, it's like, sir, you know, why is it we're just doing the TEMADs when we go on deployment, and we're not, you know, we're taking just as much risk here as we're doing our training? And I said, you know, and I explained to them why as you go forward, you know, the Condition 3 watch bill and all that. And then they asked me, they go, hey, how many people did you have on your cruiser, sir? And, you know, it's one of those numbers you just always remember. And I said, 320. And it got quiet. And I said, well, why? How many do you have? They said 360. Now, that's not to say that's right. That's probably not the right number, because we have to have the right amount of people. But we are challenged to move people where we need them in our distribution system. And Admiral Now's working hard on it. I talked to you about some of the incentive programs. We're working on that. But right now, we man our ships up to their full requirement at Comp 2X, because we know that's when they're getting the most training. I will tell you that in the maintenance phase, which I worry a lot about, as they transition to basic, there's a good argument that says, hey, that's where you have to be fully manned. And so we're starting to look at, okay, if you can't man them fully there, can I at least give you the leadership, you know, in the chief's mess, and the right rates to kind of move out on that mission? And so we're getting ready to do some work on that as we continue to try to solve the longer term problem. But it's a tough one, and it's an all-hands one. COs do a really good job of holding us accountable and pointing out when we're doing dumb things. But I would tell you that the stress. You know, you go back to the AIC supervisors that I talked about. Some of those folks are, you know, they're at sea a lot. Their purge tempo, op tempo is pretty high. And we have to watch that. At some point, we can't do it. And so we're figuring out, can we put them all in a det? And so it's making us think creatively. But I do think the training is good. I do think the manning we have to watch very carefully. And we've got some good tripwires in place, right? But we need to do better there, and we will do better.
A specific training question for you from
Yeah.
Courtney Towles. And you talked about taking care of our sailors. How are we taking care of the STGs assigned to ASW LCSs? They have no way to maintain proficiency and are working out of rate.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, you know, when we were doing a lot of VBSS, in the Fifth Fleet centric days, when a lot of our sonarmen were just doing boarding teams or manning up crew serve weapons. We have looked at that, actually. We see right now, as we continue testing that mission package, we've been looking at that pool of bodies to try to maybe put on to some of our destroyers to maintain that proficiency as a TEMAD source. It's kind of like when we looked at Aegis Ashore in Poland, right? A lot of Aegis FCs assigned there. Really didn't have there wasn't a building there. There's a foundation, I think, now, and so we went after getting all those folks and putting aboard our destroyers. I think we're looking at doing the same thing there, so we can continue to do that. That's at least right now, as we finish up the testing and then determine what we're going to do with that mission package as we go forward.
Okay. From Kyle Craig, what are some of the initiatives you're looking into getting to get more Whitties, and do you foresee it becoming a requirement for career progression?
I don't know if it'll be a requirement. That does come up. We have talked about, where we talk about it is, you know, let's talk about the Whitties right now, and Admiral Alexander is much smarter than me on it, but I'll give you sort of the overview. Okay, first of all, it's the best thing we ever did, right? Our weapons tactics instructors. We have a lot of applicants. We would like to get them all. We don't. We get about 2/3 of them right now. One of the biggest reasons why that we found is, you know, they want to compete for some of the other great talent management jobs we have. They want to do some of our graduate programs, not MPS. I was a big MPS fan. Now they want to go to the private schools that we offer them. It's much smarter than I was. And so graduate school and then trying to figure out how it fits into our career path has been our challenge. And so we're looking at that. We've also come up with a way to different schemes, and Admiral Alexander can probably talk about this better than I, but okay, we can make sure that not only can you get your Whitty training between your first and second tours, you know, but we'll still get a production tour out of you where you go and serve at SMITIC or somewhere else and go to graduate school at the same time. So we're putting a lot of brain power into it, trying to focus on how we can get them. I talk about all the time, hey, let's just say, nope, you're a Whitty, and you know, we're going to drag you along. I'm not sure how effective that will be, but we have seen an uptick this year. I think we'll probably we've got the most ever coming in. They do screen for command at higher rates than conventional officers, and so it's a good path. I think what we need to really crack the code on is how do we get it so that they can get that graduate education, have that production tour, and be a Whitty, and how do we make it work? And we are working hard at it, I think, and if you want more on that, please go see Admiral Alexander. I'm probably not doing it justice up here, but I've asked him to, hey, what do we need to do? And Captain Kennedy back there from PERS 41, he's been at the forefront of trying to figure that out. So please go and talk to them as well. And I'm happy to listen to your ideas if you've got other ideas on how to do it.
Okay, I've got a media question. Sam Legrone, U.S. Navy.
Oh yeah, Sam.
Yeah. Has there been measurable improvement in ship handling skills in the JO SWO force? In 2019, a snap test of the JO OODs showed almost 80% with gaps in knowledge. So he's looking for the improvement. How do you measure that?
How do we measure our improvement in our JO proficiency? Well, we have captured an awful lot of data, and we could spend a lot of time talking about it, but we know, hands down, from the data that we've seen, that our JOs are more proficient from the OD competency tests we've had. So we measure just, you know, because what we're doing now is with the logbook, right, we're able to measure each individual officer's time aboard, how many things they've done, and then as they come back in to the next trainer or at ADOC or their next touch point or department head, we're able to see that progression of how well they've done.
You know, we opened, or you opened up all the training centers. There are a lot of them here, and a lot of people had a chance to go visit, you know, Mariner Skills Training Center. Could you talk a little bit about that, what you're getting out of that, the quality of that?
I think the quality is phenomenal. I mean, the throughput, one, is really good. We get a lot of people in there. And it's just one of those things that's sort of intuitive, but until you see it. So, for example, when we opened up the OD course, the new OD course that we just ran, a lot of those officers, right, they're going off to their second tour. And so we're getting them right out of the fleet. So we're looking at what skill sets do they have, and then leveling them out. So what you get at that point, most of these JOs have been out on deployment, doing the real stuff, and they come back and they're very aggressive, confident ship handlers. But what we found is, hey, we really need to reinforce rules of the road with them. And so it's the best of both worlds, right? You're getting what you wanted, you're getting competent ship handlers, and now you're coming back and showing them, hey, we know that's what you're doing out there, but don't forget this part. And it's really resonated with them. So that's one thing I'd say. And then just the fact that, you know, I'll communicate with COs out on deployment, and they'll just say, hey, sir, these guys, this is working. And I think the best part, though, to be quite honest, is when we introduce the assessments at each level, right? So at the division officer, department head, XO, CO, major command, every time you're going back out, you're getting assessed by Lex Walker's folks up at SWAS. And that's a pretty tough one, right? I've talked to aviation big deck CO on USS Boxer. She told me that was one of the hardest things she'd done. But she appreciated the time we gave her to prepare for it and go up there. And so I think we got that right, and we need to do the same thing with tactics, right? We're starting to measure as people graduate from TAO courses, how well did they do? Then we'll go out and evaluate them on an exercise. Same concept, building that data so that we can know what does it take to build that really competent tactician or ship handler. We're really good at measuring that stuff now. I do think, and we're always talking about this, is there something else we should be measuring, you know, and getting other analytics people involved? But we have a treasure trove of information.
Another question from the audience, from Rick Easton. To defeat a peer competitor, what are your top concerns, and what specifically are you doing to address it?
I think the top concerns are one is the hypersonics as we look at DDG 1000. That's one I track. I think getting DDG Flight 3 out there on time. I mean, what do we say, Paul? What's the cheer? Keep Jack on track. And that's another one. I think it's key. It's you know, looking at the directed energy stuff we have going and continuing to work with that. I think LCS, some of the capability there, and you know, integrated combat system, and then what about everyone else? How do you pull down that that targeting data that we're going to need to go after some of our adversaries, not only on a DDG but on an LCS? So those are some of the things I think about, and I think we are moving ahead pretty fast on those. I think experimentation is something we need to continue to do. We've got a few things on the plate for the next year. Stay pretty close with Lauren Selby at ONR on that. And I think we could do more of that, quite frankly. Always looking for opportunities, because I think that does give us the edge, as we talked about earlier today.
Got one last question, then we'll go to closing remarks from you.
Sure.
And this is from Jay Riddler, Navy League, San Diego. Will we get a replacement for Bonham Richard?
No, for Bonham Richard, just so everybody knows, I mean, obviously you read the papers and we towed her out of here. I usually get the question on, you know, how did we manage the gap? The team on Tripoli, great team over there. We accelerated that team through, and then we doing some upgrades to make an island quickly here, and so we have the right balance. So the answer is quite frankly, no, we're not. We were able to manage it through some of these other ships.
Great. Admiral, over to you for the final remarks.
All right. Hey, first of all, I'm looking forward to talking to all of you. Some of you I know I'll see again on the waterfront. I appreciate all the questions, and what I'd say is, again, yeah, you should be proud of what we're doing, proud of your sailors, and I know you all are, and embrace the hard work we have to do. There are some things that will remain persistent that we're going to have to work through, but we have the most capable force, and we prove it every day. All you have to do is go down to those ships and talk to those sailors or those JOs and get those briefs that I get every day, and you'll see what a product we put on the playing field, and it's a really good one. Yes, it has its challenges, but I think that's what we're all here for, is to get after that stuff and make sure our ships and sailors are enabled. And looking forward to talking with everybody afterwards. Please, if I missed something or you didn't want to, I guess most of you put your name on those, but if you want to come up and ask more questions, I'm happy to engage with you. And thanks for having me here today. It really means a lot, and because I love talking about our force. And thank you, sir, for putting all this on, and to Bill and the team and all the support folks.
So thank you, Admiral. I get a couple closing remarks here, too. So I take a look at what has been orchestrated here over the last 2 days or so, and it's the Stay Navy. You know, what is the value to you individually? What is the need to satisfy the requirements for our national defense? And we're moving in the right direction. You know, and about 8 years, 9 years out of uniform at this point, and I take a look at the progress that we've made. So there's issues, but every one of those, you think of man, train, and equip, we are going after all of those. That's all of you, both in uniform and out of uniform, under the leadership that we have in the surface warfare community. Admiral Kitchener doing a terrific job, others, Admiral Schleiss out there, we got, you know, Pers back there, Admiral Noel. The team is pulling together and doing wonderful things, and I think it's important for all of us to remember, where but the Navy, where but the surface Navy in particular, do you have the opportunity to learn every day, to continue to grow in new and challenging opportunities every day, to make a difference not only to yourself, but to your shipmates every day, and to be able to deliver to our national defense. What higher purpose would you have than being able to do those kind of things? And we're going after it in a very, very strong way. It's powerful. Where we are today is better than where we have been in the past. Each and every one of you needs to grab onto that and personally add to that difference. It doesn't matter whether you're E1 or O10, you all make a difference. And your country needs you now, your nation is critical, your families need this to work. We have peer competition around the world right now at a level that is Cold War-like. The game is changing. You heard when we started this session, we have dead Marines in Afghanistan. I think that's the first time for casualties in 2 years. The surface Navy is going to make a huge difference. Be a proud part of that. Let's go out there and do well. And I've got one last thing. Julie Howard has been with SNA for 20 years. We're at her 20th anniversary right now, contributing to the whole team. You know, Bill Erickson doing a terrific job. Everybody has really gone out of their way to do a terrific orchestration of getting back for an in-purpose event like this. So, you know, I thank San Diego, I thank Admiral Kitchener. We look forward to doing this in person in Washington, D.C. in January 11th through the 13th. We'll continue to do the streaming because I think that's incredibly valuable. When we did that at National last year, kicked it off with the CNO, and it went everywhere. We were getting feedback from Rhoda, from Bahrain, from Japan, as well as what we do locally. So again, I thank everybody in the staff. Thank you all for being here. I thank you personally for your leadership and driving hard. And let's have a round of applause for Admiral Kitchener.